I think reading is very important. Reading is one of the sources from which you understand the world. Of course, you understand it through your parents, your friends, your teachers, your fellow students, etc. Through gossip, through television, through the internet. But you also understand it through reading. And reading both very short and concentrated things like poetry, essays, letters, short stories, and also things that are much longer, like novels or non-fiction. So reading is fine, but it doesn't mean that you have to read in a kind of religious way. The fact that you've opened a book doesn't necessarily mean that you have to read it to the bitter end. I would just say that read what you enjoy doing, read what engages you, read what interests you, moves you, amuses you, makes you think, and also read for fun. Read some useless stuff as well. Well, personal experience is enormously important, and by that I just don't mean events that have happened to you that you could put in a plot, but also characters who you've met, and also your views, the views that you have. All these come from your personal experience. But it's not enough to say, oh well, I'll only write from my personal experience. You've also got to go by other people's personal experiences if you're writing a novel. Or you can invent characters. For example, in A Suitable Boy, there's a character called Man. He doesn't resemble anyone I know, but to me he's just as real as the characters who are based on people whom I actually know. But this leads us also to the question of poetry. With poetry, of course, personal experience is at the heart of it, because you're writing from your own heart. And it's very important, no matter what anyone says, no matter what your parents say, what your family says, what the world says, what laws say, you have to learn at heart to be yourself. That is one of the most important lessons that as a human being and as a writer, you must take most seriously. I didn't know from the beginning. I always wrote a little poetry, sort of cat-mat type stuff when I was young. But, and later when I was an adolescent, I wrote all this love poetry, which was pretty awful. But at any rate, if I hadn't written the awful stuff, I wouldn't write anything even slightly better later. But what made me realize that I was inclined to be a writer was not the travel book that I wrote about hitchhiking across Tibet, because that could be seen as an account of something that had happened to me. But when I started writing The Golden Gate. The Golden Gate is a novel in verse, for those of your readers who don't know. It's a novel, but it's also a very long poem. And it was inspired by a long poem by Pushkin, the Russian writer, translated wonderfully well. That was also a novel in verse. So it was a revelation to me. I was an economics student. I had done everything except my dissertation. But I just decided that that wasn't what I was going to do. I was going to write this novel. I had to write it. It was within me. And so for 9 months I hid away and tried to avoid my professors and everyone else and wrote it. And that again is an example of following what's in your heart. Even if you're supposed to become Dr. Seth with a PhD, you eventually have to go by what is true to your heart and to your soul and to your brain. Well, I must tell you, though this sounds a bit ungracious, the promoting part is for me pretty much of a hassle. I'm not very fond of fame, and I certainly don't like talking about my books endlessly, okay? And being wise to the young. Not my thing, but I'm doing it, okay? Now I'm working backwards, that's the promotion part. The editing part is actually quite interesting. You've done the main work, so to speak. It may seem a little pedantic, but it's quite a lot of fun sometimes, getting things absolutely right. But the part that's most inspiring, and also I would say the most difficult, is the actual writing of the arc of the book. Now, I'm not someone who writes a chapter and then goes back and revises it, and then writes 2 and then goes back. No, I try to get the whole arc of the book down so that it has the ring of real life. And then I go about revising it. So, from my point of view, there are different aspects of pleasure and different aspects of pain involved in each of these 3 stages that you've mentioned. 3 values.
Yes.
You think the youth only deserve 3 values? You want a few more.
Few more.
I'm just going to talk off the top of my head. But I'll tell you what my parents believed in, okay? I'm not sure whether we've really fulfilled it, but at any rate. Honesty. And by that I mean, not just honesty in terms of, not taking bribes and so on, but also being true to yourself. And being, if not brave, at least forthright. Okay? Honesty. Not being cruel. Or trying to oppress people unjustly. And the third thing, which I have failed, I'm afraid, is hard work. Because intrinsically, I'm quite a lazy person. Even though I've written long books. The reason I managed to write long books is because although I'm lazy and not very disciplined and not very determined, I'm also obsessive. So if I want to find out how the story is going to end, I'll only find out if I write the book. So I better write it. So let's say honesty, non-cruelty and hard work. Actually that does come to 3.
It does.
Do you want me to add a 4th? No, it's fine.